The Attack of the Dead Men event during the World War I is undoubtedly one of the scariest events in history. How did an attack that German soldiers considered easy turn into a scary event that will be remembered throughout history? Let's have a look together. Osowiec Fortress was built in the late 19th century on a strategic point within what is now Poland, although at that time it was part of the Russian Empire. The castle was built specifically to stop a possible German invasion of the Russian Empire. It was located at a distance of about 50 kilometers from East Prussia. It was quite a challenging place for the German High Command during World War I. The fort, which was so close to the German border and effectively controlled one of the few rail lines in the area, had to either be taken or demolished. During World War I, the Germans tried to take the fortress twice, in September 1914 and February 1915. The second attack in February 1915 severely damaged most of the fort's defenses with heavy bombing. But they failed to take the castle from the Russian forces. The Russians were surprised that the fort had withstood such a fierce attack. Due to the multi-layered defense system, the Russians did not need many soldiers to manage the fortress. There were a total of 900 Russian forces, 500 soldiers, and 400 militia defending the castle. In August 1915, they thought they had a good chance against the German soldiers who were again at the gate. After all, the fortress had proven itself twice before. But this time there was a factor they had never encountered before. A deadly weapon designed to inflict maximum damage, developed by the Germans in the laboratory, not the factory, toxic gas. The use of poison gas in wars was quite a new thing. In 1914 the French used tear gas, and in early 1915 the Germans used poison gas for the first time at Balamov, but they didn't get the result they wanted. The Germans were well prepared for this attack against the Russians. German meteorologists had studied the direction of the winds and set dates. After the use of gas masks were produced for the infantry who would attack. Gas masks were in a primitive condition for that period. But while the Germans had masks to protect themselves from the negative effects of the gas, the Russians did not have the equipment to resist the gas. In this way, the Germans would send poison gas to the fortress and attack the fortress with gas masks. They would easily take the fortress from the exhausted or dead Russian soldiers. At 4 a.m. on August 6, 1915, the Germans saw the wind movement they had been waiting for. It was the flare of the attack. 30 German artillery equipped with poison gas launched the attack. Before the chlorine even reached the fortress, its dreadful effects had already begun. A cloud of green and yellow surrounding the fortress had killed the birds, turned the leaves of the trees brown, darkened the grass, and killed the Russian soldiers standing just outside the fort. The Russian soldiers did not have an effective method of protection. And this has had devastating consequences. The gas combined with the body's moisture to form hydrochloric acid. The Russians were being eaten alive by the air they breathed. The gas began to melt the lungs and throats of the soldiers. Their skin was flaking off. The Russian soldiers, who were inside the fortress and were less exposed to the gas, tried to cover their wounds with bandages and pieces of their uniforms. About 100 Russian soldiers, who were quite enraged and almost dead, survived. But against these 100 soldiers, there were 7,000 German soldiers. Just as they had planned, the Germans began to run toward the gassed Russian soldiers. The 100 or so Russian soldiers, led by Lieutenant Vladimir Kotlinski, not only defended themselves on the spot, and they immediately prepared to counterattack. The lieutenant was determined to stop the enemy. Russian soldiers, covered in bloody bandages, were coughing up their internal organs. Nevertheless, the soldiers decided to attack the German soldiers who were about to enter the fort. The Germans were horrified when they saw the Russian soldiers, who were foaming at the mouth, coughing their lungs, and were still trying to attack, no different from zombies with their faces wrapped in bloody bandages. The Germans withdrew so quickly that they fell into their wire traps and lost most of their soldiers in the stampede that occurred during the escape. The Russian soldiers, who were so close to death, took the cannons and fired on the fleeing German soldiers. As a result, a handful of surviving Russian soldiers had repelled 7,000 Germans. They had protected the strategically important castle. The journalists who wrote the story called this frightening event the Attack of the Dead Men.